Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of the Shenandoah Valley. My name is Evan Yannick, and I am a member of the Board of Trustees. I want to call your attention to the front of our order of service, which I thought I had. I don't have one here. It has the mission of our church. Oh, there it is. The mission of the Unitarian Universalist congregation of the Shenandoah Valley is to nurture spirituality, inspire growth and learning in the search for truth, and challenge us to live our values conscientiously through service and example. For those of you who are new to Unitarian Universalism, we have a little white card in the pews or in the foyer that we'd like you to fill out so that we can stay in contact with you. You can learn more about Unitarian Universalism and our congregation in particular by receiving our newsletter or just staying in touch. After you fill it out, please drop it in the collection basket or in the foyer, and we will stay in contact with you. We make it a weekly tradition to invite visitors and guests to stand and introduce themselves, tell us where they're from, if you're willing. We don't want to put anybody on the spot who's not willing, but we do want to make sure that we welcome you to our congregation. So if there's any visitors on this side, please feel free to stand and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ross. I'm from Philly. I'm still here. I brought a new guest with me. It's my friend Crystal. She's from Fayetteville.
Awesome. Welcome. And welcome back. Yes. Any other visitors? Okay. How about over here? All right. Well, we appreciate you to keep on coming. All are welcome here, and as we like to say, you don't have to think alike to love alike. I have one announcement. We are going through a transition, obviously, after a year of pandemic and mask wearing and whatnot, and our church definitely has survived and come through it stronger. However, we want to make sure that everyone is aware of the challenges, and we talked about it at the annual meeting with regards to our finances, and one of those things had to do with our cleaning of the church, and we've set up a volunteer schedule to make sure that the cleaning of the church takes place on a regular basis so that we have a warm and welcome place here to come and worship. If you would like to be a part of that service, please reach out to Jackie Franklin, and she can help to organize that. It only takes a short amount of time each week to get the church clean and safe for us to all come and worship here. Thank you. And now let our service begin.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Diane, who's going to help us with the chalice lighting. Each Sunday, we kindle this flame to serve as a light of hope, of faith, of community, and of love, and to remind us that we must keep that flame burning in our hearts, not just for this hour, but throughout our days. Our opening words today are from the Shaker hymn, and if you will indulge me, why speak them when you can sing them? 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in that place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight. To turning and turning we come round right. As we progress through life, we too turn and turn. The earth circles the sun each year, the seasons and the stars change, and in effect, we circle around not just the sun, but the galaxy, the sky, and our own globe. We turn through the years, we grow, rethink, and our perspectives change. We look at the world around us, and we strip off the baggage and preconceptions of the past. Our ideas develop, and their buds flower, and in time reflect the evolution we have undergone and who we have become. And hopefully, then, we do, in the end, come round right. Now, please rise as you're able and willing, and open your hymnals to number 134, Our World is One World.
And this is the time in the service when we invite you to come forward and share your joys, concerns, and other moments in your life that you wish to share.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Tina, and the wife of one of my grandsons went into labor on Friday, and that's not good because she's only 27 weeks pregnant. So if you know any magic words that keep babies inside, we'd be real grateful. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Heidi, and at the other end of life, I am about to embark on a class called Village Death Care Citizen, and it's an invitation that I've accepted to look at death and dying, and this is as many of you know, the chapter I'm in with my mother. So I'm really looking forward to this class.
Good.
And I will ask Diane to light a candle for all those who have unspoken fears, challenges, joys, concerns, and who cannot speak them to us. Linda, will you introduce the choir song?
Yeah. This is a Unitarian hymn, My Life Flows On, an Endless Song. Some people might know it as How Can I Keep From Singing? And there are 3 verses, and I found out that the third one was written sooner than the older traditional verses. It's from the McCarthy era, written by Doris Flynn. So when you hear her talking about tyrants in jail cells, I guess she knew what she was talking about. And please listen till the very end. There's a surprise at the end. Oh, Not me.
Mangasorian. Christian from the Ottoman Empire, who was first a Presbyterian preacher, then an ethical culture leader, and then from 1900 to 1925, the leader of the Independent Religious Society of Chicago. He was also the author of The Truth About Jesus, Is He a Myth? And the Bible Unveiled. And here's what he wrote. The moral world is the work of people. We do not make the physical forces, the laws which govern the constellations, the ebb and flow of the days. The day dawns, and the day draws to a close. The forests put on their foliage, and in due time drop their leaves. We may all bandage our eyes, and still the sun will shine. The shutting or opening of our eyes will have no effect upon the light. But there will be no moral light if our spiritual light is darkened. There will be no justice, or goodness, or truth in the world if we do not create them.
Now we will collect the offerings so that the work of this congregation can continue and thrive. And while we do so, we will have another choir offering, and I participated in this with Linda, and it was the most fun thing we've sung in ages. It's called Howdy Howdy Diddle Day. And I will ask one last thing, as my former minister at the UU Church in Asheville used to say, don't give until it hurts, give until it feels good.
Whereas he flew, once he loved.
I'm going to start the way Michael does, with a joke.
Take this first.
Some of you might have heard it. What do you get when you put 3 Unitarian Universalists in a room? 6 opinions. That's sort of how I feel about my own beliefs as a lifelong birthright Unitarian Universalist. Not only do I come from Asheville, which is a rarity, but I was also born and bred Unitarian at the Asheville Church. And being a Southern Unitarian makes me kind of a unicorn, a rare and mythical beast. But I'm not the only one. Look around you. This room is filled with mythical creatures, iconoclasts, unicorns. Look at the person to your right. Maybe it's a griffin. On your left, a couple of manticores and a sphinx. I see a lot of sphinxes in here. Maybe you could also find one just by looking in the mirror. Now, a lot of people who come to this denomination from other faiths ask the question, how do these strange beasts, these iconoclasts, think? What is it that they believe? And of course, as I said, with 3 of us, there are 6 sets of beliefs. But I'll tell you what it was like growing up in Asheville at the church there in the 1960s. We had a director of RE who was a union man. He worked for Southern Railways. He had had polio as a child, so he walked with a brace and a limp. He had a gruff voice and a warm spirit, and he had the ability to shout it out like a union boss or a revival tent preacher. And yet he was a Unitarian. He was kind of like a manticore, which, if you don't know, has the body of a lion, the tail of a scorpion, and the head of a human, which makes it frightening, potentially dangerous, but very wise. And at the beginning of this Sunday school year, my brother and sister, who were in his class, were told that that class had a study plan for the year. They were going to look at and study about all the world's great religions. And that meant studying their holy books. They were going to read the Quran and the Torah and the rest of the Old Testament and the New Testament, the I Ching, the Vedas. But they were going to start with the New Testament because Unitarian Universalism was a descendant of Christian faith. So, of course, these privileged, bratty, self-righteous, adolescent smartass bugs all groaned and moaned and whined and complained, "We're not Christians, we're Unitarians. Our parents didn't want us in the Christian churches. Why do we have to read the Bible?" So, after hearing a lot of this feedback, George Cornell looked at them and said, "All right, you don't want to study the Bible? Well, you don't have to. Instead of reading the Bible, you're going to write your own." And they did. They had to come up with parables and prophets, commandments, guides to living, rules, regulations, prescriptions, and proscriptions. They wrote their own book of faith, of truths, their own good book. And in a way, isn't that what we all do here, every one of us? We see the same things, we look at them differently. We look at them depending on our individual perspective, our moment in time, the stage of life we're in, the joys and sorrows and tribulations that might be affecting us. We see things through our own eyes in different ways at different moments. I look at this chalice. This is the iconic chalice of the faith, of Unitarian Universalism, uses the chalice and the flame. And I see the chalice and the flame. But I also see the ship that sails us on the waters, like the hymn that Linda played last week. Somos el barco, somos el mar. Yo navego en ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the boat, we are the sea. I sail in you, you sail in me. Another thing I see here is the dove of peace. And instead of a flame, I see two hands cupping the flame. They're cupping it and nurturing it. It's the flame of truth, the flame of peace that we try to bring about in the world. But it's not only cupping it, it's releasing it. So just looking at that chalice, I see many different things. I see the hands, the flame, the ship that we sail in together, and the chalice itself, as well as the peace that we believe in. For me, faith, my faith, is just as simple and just as complicated as that. It's simple because it means trying to do what's right with love. But it's complicated because so many of the values that I try to live by, the touchstones of my personal beliefs, are sometimes at odds. We had a controversy about the 8th principle. Do I compromise my opinion about it, or my preference, so that I can support the group's decision, or do I hold out against the larger body on principle, or out of pride or stubbornness, or maybe actually a conviction that I'm right? Which do I value more? My iconoclastic freedom as an individual, or my membership and participation in this community? How do they balance out? Do I uphold justice or mercy? Now, I remember reading, and maybe some of you do too, especially those with gray hair or little hair. We didn't read this in church, but we read it in high school literature class. Jonathan Edwards' sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. He said, the sword of divine justice is every moment brandished over their heads, and it is nothing but the hand of arbitrary mercy and God's mere will that holds it back. Now, unlike the Puritans, I don't believe in God's divine mercy. I don't even believe in God myself, but I do believe in justice. As Dr. Martin Luther King said, quoting Theodore Parker, the Unitarian minister, and Michael talked about this a few weeks ago, the arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. But what does that mean? Isn't justice a pretty amorphous concept when we think about it? Maybe it means one thing to you and one thing to me. Maybe it meant one thing to me yesterday in a certain situation and something else today, and something different 5 years ago. And maybe it will mean something very different tomorrow. Maybe what they meant about justice, Dr. King and Theodore Parker, echoes these words written by the Greek philosopher Solon around 600 BCE. Think about this. Justice will be achieved when those who are not injured are just as indignant as those who are. That was 2,500 years ago. So even without being able to define it, I believe in justice, and I believe in mercy, and they're sometimes at odds. And I believe that it's important to apply justice first and mercy second. And the mercy only after we see how the perpetrator handles the justice. Is it with humility, with shame, embarrassment, remorse, atonement? Is it with a real change of heart and of behavior? Or is it resentment, anger, disputatiousness? When you see statues of justice, they're all blindfolded. But justice isn't blind. It reflects the beliefs of the giver and the receiver. If there were a statue of justice with mercy, I imagine that it would be shown peering into the eyes, the window of the soul, to try to see what's really in the perpetrator's heart. But that's hard to know, no matter how insightful you are. Now, fortunately, most of us don't find ourselves in that position very often of having to mete out justice. And I don't know how I would do it if I were a judge or master of the universe. But I'm curious, of all of you here, how many of you have been in that role of literally or metaphorically having to assign a formal, official punishment to somebody? You had to fire an employee, or cancel a contract, or dock someone's pay, turn somebody in to the school principal, or to the boss, or to the police. I have never had to do that. But if you've had to mete out justice in any of those ways or other ways, would you raise your hand? And hold it up for a moment. Quite a few of us have had to do that. Now, holding your hand up, keep it up. In retrospect, would you apply the same measures of justice again in the same situation? That is interesting, because I now have to ask, did you temper that justice with mercy? Did you feel that you were doing it fairly and rightly and well? Because if you did, and you can say that you would do the same thing again, then you were doing something right. Now, another question, how many of us have been on the other side? Recipients of justice. Not necessarily from a court, but, a college punishing a student for cheating, or withholding tenure from somebody who deserved it, or giving it to someone who didn't, or even a group of American bishops denying communion to a president because he believes in the right to abortion. Even maybe being disciplined by your parents for some minor fault. Think about the worst time you were punished and received justice for what you did. Think back, and here's a Sphinx asking a riddle because there's no right or wrong answer. Was that justice tempered by mercy? Did you learn from your action and its consequences? Are you a better person because justice was given to you and that justice was fair and merciful? Was it by your own standards just when you received it? Raise your hand if that's true. Interesting. What about those who have received that justice and it was not fair, that you were unfairly punished? Quite a few of you. But you look in the mirror sometimes, at least I do, sometimes straight into my own eyes. And through that window, you do look into your own soul. And if you ever do this, you look at yourself and you ask yourself, what kind of person am I at heart? And sometimes I see someone in there I don't like. I see someone who would hand out justice without mercy. I said a moment ago I didn't know how I would do it if I were a judge. Well, I think I lied. I would be the SOB who doles out justice to the worst offenders, the hanging judge, the guy who throws the book at the bad guys, just like on cop shows. I'd be the guy who glints down at the convicted perp and pronounces sentence with a huge sense of self-satisfied self-righteousness. Lock them up. No mercy. Unfortunately, I'm not a judge. But I see that in myself. And that brings me back to this question. How well do I understand justice and mercy? I don't know. But it does lead me to another question. And these are the things I wrestle about in trying to determine my faith, my beliefs. To the extent that I do grasp the concept, how do I stand up for it in the world? Because that's the key. Now, another philosopher, the sage Hillel, who was born about 110 BCE, asked this question in his school of Talmudic scholarship: if I am not for myself, who will be for me? And being only for myself, who am I? And if not now, when? Now, the way I read that, this is not just an occasional act of standing up for yourself and also standing up for others or lifting them up. It's a call for us to always be there for our, what's the Southern term, brethren and sistren. For being there for all of humanity. If I don't do the right thing now, at this moment, in this crisis, or at this inconvenient moment when I'm busy with other stuff of my own, if I don't stand up for good, for righteousness, for the right thing now, when it's needed, how can I be righteous myself? What am I? Now, this doesn't mean that I expect anybody else to stand up for me when I need it. Reciprocity doesn't mean a quid pro quo. What it means is that my failure to stand up for what's right when it's needed, to do something to help others, to be on the side of justice and love, justice tempered with mercy, means that I have failed not in my duty to my fellow citizens, though that too, but in my duty to myself. Who am I? What am I? Because to be real, righteousness has to be who I am, not who I strive to be. And that sense of reciprocity also imbues Hillel's words with a kind of meaning that we follow in our denomination. As Larry Perlman puts it, and did put it on buttons and bumper stickers, love starts here. It was that same motivation that led Hillel, the Talmudic scholar, to the other great teaching that he imposed on his students, but also in the courts, because he was a judge in religious courts. It's the original version of the Golden Rule, the one which, of course, Jesus of Nazareth learned because Hillel was born in 110 BCE and his teachings were widespread 100 years later. That which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. That is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Go and learn. That's what Hillel said. And of course, Christian faith communities took that same premise and slightly changed it from do not do that to love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat others well, hope that they will treat you well. The idea of reciprocity is still there, but it begins with your choice of action or withholding action. That which is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. Do unto others what you would have them do to you. Both of those are different sides of the same coin. They begin with what you do and how you view the world. Now, coming out of those traditions, I'm also a member of the Ethical Humanist Society of Asheville. A little background on that. The original Ethical Society was founded by Felix Adler, whose father was the chief rabbi of the primary Reformed temple in New York, Temple Emmanuel on Fifth Avenue in the late 19th century. And the son, Felix, was sent to Heidelberg, Germany, to study for the rabbinate, and he stayed there for 6 years. And he came back as the, rabbi in waiting for his father, the heir apparent. The problem was when he got back from Heidelberg, he no longer believed in God. Or put more precisely, he no longer believed in the necessity of believing in God. And the first sermon he gave at the temple elicited such a negative reaction from the congregation that it was also the last sermon he gave. He went off to Cornell, where he became a professor of philosophy. And for a few years later, he came back to New York. And in 1876, he founded the Society for Ethical Culture. in which there was no necessity to believe in God. He propounded principles of ethical culture, and the first four I find fascinating. Morality is independent of theology. New moral problems have arisen in modern industrial society that have not been adequately dealt with by the world's religions. We have a duty to engage in philanthropy, by which he meant social improvement of the world. We have a duty to engage in philanthropy in the advancement of morality. And self-reform should go in lockstep with social reform. That last, along with the first, are keys to this set of beliefs. They sort of recall my favorite elevator speech about Unitarian Universalism, which is a version of what Evan spoke as our principles here. This is shorter and easier to remember. Love is the doctrine of this church. A quest for truth, its sacrament. And service is its prayer. Service being social reform, prayer being self-reform. That is how we put into action our beliefs. So 145 years ago, the Society for Ethical Culture put forth the idea that morality, the right behavior, ethical living, righteousness, whatever you want to call it, is innate in human beings. It is not dependent on theology. It's part of who we are as people, and not part of whom we become as people of faith. It's a kind of humanism that doesn't reject the principles of religion, but it strips off religion's clothing. It doesn't object to theism. It just sets it aside. And it finds that those same principles of morality and ethics are right here within us. Do not do that which is hateful to others. Do unto others that which is good, and it will come back to you. As Manticore said in the reading that Shelley read, the moral world is the work of people. There will be no justice or goodness or truth in the world if we do not create them. Now, Adler did one other thing, which I find interesting. You might not, but I do, because to me it's part of the core of ethical humanism and ethical behavior. He turned the golden rule around one more quarter turn. He gave it one more twist. He didn't assume that our actions would or could or should lead others to behave towards us in a good way, reciprocally. In other words, he didn't believe that we set the standards of good behavior. Instead of saying that goodness starts in what we do unto others or what we do not do unto others, Adler called us to start with the others. This is what he wrote. Evoke the best from other people, and thereby from yourself. Self-reform, inherently wedded to social reform. Evoke the best from other people, and thereby from yourself. Lay your expectations on them. If you do that with purity of heart, with faith in your fellow human beings, they will live up to it. And by doing that, you become a better person too. Now, I find that approach the hardest to achieve. There are a lot of people out there, and you know who they are, whose behavior is so egregious, so despicable, that no matter what hopes you have, however high or even not so high you place your expectation on them for their willingness to evoke the best, they'll disappoint you. For some people, it seems there's no floor, not even a basement below which they'll go. And that's cynical, but it's part of what I have to wrestle with. So I turn back to our chalice. and I see a different message and a different hope. I see this encompassing circle that for me embraces our humanity, our community, our congregation. And I see us all within that space interpreting what we see there, the symbolism of the ship in which we all sail, of the dove of peace that we pray and preach about and try to impose on the world, of the flame of our spirit and our nourishing it and letting it go. But I also notice that each of us is responding as we do that to a secret voice. It tells us this is the way to righteousness or rightness or goodness. This is who I am, and this is who I want to be, or try to be, or should be, or will be. When I turn to look at it and I see the dove and the ship and the flames in the hands, I see one other thing. The circle is not closed. It's open at the top, just a little bit. It's open to new ideas. It's open to new concepts, to new people who come in and join and change what we believe within it. Share it, nurture it, let it go, and that also lets that set of beliefs that each of us has developed within there, within our hearts, out into the world. We embrace the spirit that we find and we release it, and as the song said, thank you, Rochelle, we turn and turn, and we turn out right. Each of us, somehow, somewhere deep inside, is that mythical creature, a unicorn or a sphinx or a griffin, that has these characteristics of the manticore, of the danger, of the fear, and also of the wisdom and the morality. But it all starts in here. Our social reform is in lockstep with self-reform. We must take our wisdom and our goodness out into the universe and share it. And as we do so, things will slowly, like the arc of the universe, turn out right. May it be so.
May it be so. Well done.
Now let's please join together and sing one of my favorite hymns, number 311, Let It Be a Dance. Rise as you are able and willing.
Say
Let it be a dance we do. Embrace our shared humanity, even as we celebrate each one's individuality. And whether as a unicorn, a manticore, a sphinx, or just another unique, wonderful Unitarian Universalist creature of myth, let it be a dance. Now, as a favorite preacher of mine used to say, the service is ended, your service is begun. Go in joy, go in peace, and go in the spirit of evangelism to spread our gospel of love. And have a beautiful day.